you read chapter 1083, I suggest this. Go back and read chapter 1054, then go read chapter 1083. It feels like those chapters go so well together, because in fact they do. Just to remind you, if you don't want to go back and do all that, this is what I'm here for, to just refresh your memory and give some context into exactly what's going on here and the importance of the God Knights, and somewhat build that Shanks theory a bit more, because there's some more to it. Shanks is my guy, but he has been shrouded in mystery this entire time, and Oda's just building that up. He knew what he was doing with the silhouette, and that's what we're here to talk about, in addition to other things. Now, back to chapter 1054. This is the chapter where Green Bull is fighting against the Scabbards, and that's titled Flame Emperor. Right? That's why they go so well together, because a lot of the things we find out in 1054, Oda adds nuance and even more context in 1083. First, we see Green Bull's power and how it operates and how devastating it can be. So it's adding some context as to why Green Bull can't do what he's doing in Marijoa, because a lot of people would be affected. But it also adds context to Green Bull's character and why he would be so careful in the land of the gods, because he praises celestial dragons as gods. His personality basically operates like them. He was telling the Scabbards that because they're unaffiliated with the world government, they have no human rights. He was basically saying it is what it is, the world, that's how it works. And so Oda was establishing his character in 1054. It's funny with Green Bull, his personality is a dichotomy in regards to his devil fruit, because he says the forest is a cradle of life, and how much he dismisses life and doesn't acknowledge human rights. It's like a weird connection with a person and the devil fruit. They don't go together well, but we'll see if that rears its ugly head. But something he said there, where we got to dive a bit deeper into Green Bull's character in another video, where he talks about discrimination creating solace, which I don't necessarily disagree with. It's just more context is needed. Also in this chapter, because the God Knights were so prevalent in chapter 1083, of course we see Shanks reacting to Luffy's bounty poster, in which he's in his sun god form. And while he's looking at Luffy, he thinks about his sacrifice, he thinks about his journey to get the devil fruit, but of course he looks at his arm, and his arm is throbbing almost, just looking at Luffy. This will make sense later, just hold on. He then says he's not interested in seeing Luffy, then proceeds to say they're gonna go claim the One Piece. But the final part of this chapter is probably the most important, because in this chapter, we have a conversation between Black Horse and Akainu. Who is Black Horse? Kuruma. I'm sure you guys remember. He is the director of the Naval Bureau of Investigation. And a lot of the things he said here, again, 1083, brings it full circle. One thing he said that got lost, I think, is when he talked about Cobra. Of course, we know Sabo got the name Flame Emperor from killing Cobra, and he's regarded a hero, and in chapter 1083, we find out Sabo does not care about it as much, but he embraces it because it's helping the resistance, and even though he feels bad about Cobra, he's fine with it because, again, it's helping. However, what Tensei says, the world government, of course, was created by 20 founders. Of their descendants, only Cobra attended the reverie this year. So the fact that Cobra finally attended the reverie, and he was murdered at this reverie, brings so much more significance to it, but to them, he was an outcast, but to the revolutionaries, he was a hero. So it's a weird dichotomy between the chapters. So I would say 1054, we're getting different perspectives. The perspectives of the revolutionaries in 1083 and the perspectives of the Marines in 1054. In 1054, you guys might not have remembered, they said that they destroyed the hoof of the celestial dragons. They destroyed a symbol of the world nobles, and they declared war, and they confirmed that in 1054. They also said that Fujitora and Rukogyu led the navy into battle, but then everyone basically escaped. The only thing we didn't get context on is the destruction of the Holy Land reserves. Not sure why that's being kept a secret. I guess they don't want the people to worry as much. In the chapter 1083, they knew that the storehouses were being attacked, so they should know that the reserves were attacked. A major thing people are talking about as well is the admirals and how they look bad here. In 1054, Tensei says, I'm sure it was difficult for the admirals to exhibit their full power in the land of the gods, which is certain. And as we see in 1054 early in the chapter, Green Bull's power can cause devastating effect, and it has great AoE, area of effect. In 1083, 3 separate occasions in which Oda is telling us, hey, the admirals aren't bad, it's just that they were at a disadvantage based on where they were. And based on how Green Bull feels about things, he's naturally gonna hold back because he reveres the celestial dragons. In chapter 1054 as well, we find out about the Holy Knights. That's what the Viz calls it in this recent translation. They're called the God Knights. Now, Akainu says because they have intervened, it's all a big mess. But they did not intervene because of the attack on the Holy Land. No, they intervened because of the attempted murder of Saint Charlos. And also, Saint Mosgard, who actually saved Shirahoshi, he's being accused and he's being investigated by the Holy Knights as well. Now, one way Oda could establish the Holy Knights and the power they wield is by having one of them somewhat kill Mosgard Guard, because Guard is one of the good ones now. He's someone that we appreciate because his development and how he's evolved over time. So it'd be an interesting way for the Holy Knights to be established and also cut off the one good Celestial Dragon and the ally we feel like we have. That's just an interesting way to go about it. So they intervene because of that. So now the Holy Knights, they are involved, which is interesting considering all that went down, but that was not the trigger. Very interesting. But the Holy Knights, they're causing problems for the Fleet Admiral. So that shows just how important they are. And we find that out in chapter 1054. In chapter 1083, they mentioned that Sabo is the one that they would have their focus on. In 1054, Tensei mentioned Sabo by name and said that he was the one pulling the strings. So his name is in the mouth of the director of the Naval Bureau of Investigation. So yes, they have their eyes on Sabo. This is also the chapter where Akainu makes his declaration that he's going to drive each and every one of them back into the depths of the sea. Now, for Akainu, I'm not saying I don't believe him, but Oda needs to make him do something for us to believe that he's indeed the same man and the same threat that he used to be. Because the 7 countries of rebellion, because Lucia never existed, they're still rebelling. I'm not sure what Oda's going to make Akainu do. The God Knights, they have been relevant or needed for a while. But here's the main reason the God Knights are needed. So far, the world government seems like they're overwhelmed. Not necessarily by one specific thing, but by everything happening at once. And it seems the trump card for the world government has been the Seraphim, but I'm not even sure if they're going to have or retain all the Seraphim after Egghead. They're at a place where things are very sinister for the organization, and so they seem to be spread very thin. So they need help. And for the God Knights, if they are indeed Celestial Dragons, they're only going to move when they need to move, because I'm sure they have the attitude of the Celestial Dragons. And if they're indeed as strong as we think they are, they don't have to move if they don't want to. So honestly, the God Knights, they're a breath of fresh air because the Navy or the world government in general needed some reinforcements, and introducing with 8-9 new characters that we presume to be strong to fight against the powers that be. This makes for very interesting setup, especially with Oda talking about the free-for-all that's to come in One Piece. We are in the end game saga. Guys, time and time again, Oda is telling us that times are changing, but I still think a trigger has to happen for all these things to fall. That trigger has not happened yet. It's almost like the build-up to Marineford, right? The narrator already came in. I believe the resolution of Egghead could be that major thing that triggers something else to lead to this world war. I know you've been waiting for me to address Shanks, so let's jump to Shanks and Whitebeard's conversation. When Shanks pulled up on Whitebeard's ship, Shanks of course used Haki and knocked out some of Whitebeard's subordinates, and even had the audacity to ask Marco to join his crew. Very disrespectful. But then he goes to Whitebeard and he says, I do not want to fight. He said he brought medicinal water with him, right? And Whitebeard says, well, you just used your Haki without constraint on my ship. That's funny. But before he said that, he says, when I look at your face, it makes my scars ache. The scars I got from him. Now, of course, a lot of our sentiments back then is, well, of course he's talking about Roger. Like, why wouldn't he think about Roger when he looks at Shanks? And of course, those scars are going to ache. Well, things get a bit wonky when that happens, because we see Whitebeard presumably after the last time him and Roger fought, and there are no scars on his chest. We don't see any scars, because after that point, Roger did tell Whitebeard about everything about the ancient history, but at that time that they would fight, Roger would be extremely weak and barely able to stay alive. So this is the last time they fought, and Whitebeard has no visible scars. So were the scars actually from him, or from someone else that looks just like Shanks, or is in relation to Shanks? What's also interesting in that final talk that Whitebeard had with Roger, he now has a middle scar, but not the other 2 scars. But then when he was recruiting Ace, he has the other 2 scars. This is after Roger has probably died. So who is this man that scarred the strongest man in the world that when he's looking at Shanks makes his scars throb? Again, when Shanks was looking at Luffy's poster, his scars are throbbing. His hand that he sacrificed. For Luffy, when he even heard Akainu's name, his scar was throbbing. For Whitebeard, he looked at Shanks and the scars throb, but these scars probably are not from Roger. Who are these scars from? Let's introduce the God Knights, who Oda is hyping up now to be just as important, if not more so, than even the admirals. I'm not gonna jump the gun and say this main guy that looks like Shanks is Shanks' father or Shanks' relative, maybe a true member of the Fagarland family that was hinted in film Red. But I think all these things being connected is no coincidence, and Oda is setting up for a major reveal in regards to Shanks and his backstory, and we should brace ourselves because I think it's going to be spectacular. Now, there's also speculation that Shanks could be related to Rocks in some way, but in my mind, that doesn't make sense because these scars all happened after Roger passed away. Could it be the man scarred by fire? Could it be someone else? But these questions all reared their head after chapter 1083 because of the connection to 1054 and even chapter 433, 432, 434, right? Those are all connected. And just over a span of 10, 15, 20 years, Oda has been saving this information if this is indeed true. Guys, this chapter was spectacular for so many reasons, and I hope you enjoyed it. Leave your thoughts. Do you believe anything of what I just said? I know a lot of it is speculation, but I'm pulling from things in the manga, guys. Not making it up. These are things on the page. Leave your thoughts, like, subscribe. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.